Thanks for joining us for another episode of Worth Repeating. I'm your host, Andrea Vocab Sanderson. On this episode of Worth Repeating, we'll hear stories about the workplace. Odd jobs, office drama, and all the things we do to make money. Enjoy these stories from your friends and neighbors. This is On the Clock. Our first storyteller is Brittany Myers, aka DJ Catwalk.
What's up, everyone? I'm DJ Catwalk, and I have quite the story for you today. I have been a DJ for the past 13 years, and I've run into a few really funny situations. So I am originally from San Antonio, moved up to Austin to DJ. I got to work with a really big company there that owned 10 clubs downtown, got to DJ on 6th Street, do the whole thing. Well, it was actually right after South by one year. The company I worked for got busted by the feds. And it was due to money laundering, drug trafficking, the whole thing. So when that happened, I always had a dream to move to LA and DJ there and do my thing. So I finally was like, you know what? Now's the time. I don't have a job here anymore. So I moved to LA, and it was extremely hard for me to find a job there. I mean, let alone DJing, no. You have to know someone. That is a real phrase. That is a real thing. I couldn't get in anywhere. So finally I got hired as a bartender at a bowling alley in Hollywood, and finally talked the GM into allowing me to DJ on Wednesday nights after my day shift. So I'm bartending one day, and my shift is like 11 a.m. till 6 p.m. and it was dead. There were probably 2 lanes of bowlers. I wasn't doing anything. So my GM comes up to me and he's like, hey, just a heads up, I know you're DJing tonight. Drake is gonna throw a private party in our private area. So I just wanted to give you some time to prepare for that. And at the time, I really didn't have a lot of Drake's music, none of that. I like electronic and house music, so that's kind of what I do. So I kind of freak out. I text my roommate, and I'm like, you gotta dress up, you gotta come and support me in the booth, I need emotional support. And so she's like, of course. And as I'm texting, I hear someone behind me at the bar. So I turn around, and it's Drake and 2 of his friends. And I'm like, okay, here we go. So I turn around, can I get you all anything to drink? At the time, Drake was on his phone, not looking up, and the guys order some drinks. I make them. I go back to Drake, and I'm like, did you need anything? And he's like, he looks up at me, and he's like, what's your name? I'm like, Brittany. And he started singing my name to me. And I was like, okay, you gotta stop. I'm laughing. I don't even know, how to handle myself. And he's like, no, I'm good. And eventually I get to the point of hey, I'm gonna be DJing tonight. Is there anything specific you wanna hear? So he's like, well, what do you do? I start naming off some of the things I like to play. He's like, oh, that's really cool. He's asking about my DJ equipment. And so I asked him, do you know about DJ stuff? Do you DJ? And he's like, yeah, I like to play around with it. And I was like, if at any point you want to come up and DJ or do whatever you want, please be my guest. So he's like, I have some music in the car, we'll see how it goes. And I'm like, okay, cool. Just trying to play it cool. So the night starts. I start DJing. I just see loads of people walking into his party area, and I'm getting more and more nervous. And I look up at one point, and Skrillex is walking towards me, and he's smiling, and I'm like, me? Looking behind me. It was me. He's like, oh, I love your set. I love all the music you're playing. And I'm like, I love you. And he's like, I love you too. And he was so sweet. And so I asked him, if you could please come back by before you leave. He's like, yeah, of course. So the party keeps going, and he ended up coming back. I asked, he was with his manager and a couple of friends, and I'm like, can I get y'all anything to drink? He was so sweet. He's like, no, let me go grab y'all a drink. And he stood in like the longest line to do it too. And I was like, this guy is like, what is this night? And what was crazy for me in this moment was, you know, moving from getting booked for these really great events in Austin to no one caring who I was, where I came from. No one would give me a chance. And so when I got this bowling alley gig, it hurt my DJ ego. You know, I'm like, okay, like, should I tell people I'm doing this? Should I just write it out? And it ended up being the coolest place because of these random occurrences with like people I look up to in music. I got to DJ for Calvin Harris there, a bunch of different celebrities, and to me it was like you can never take for granted your situation. You just have to like treat it like it is the best gig. It is the coolest club you've ever played, even if there are 10 people there. The time I got to DJ for Calvin Harris, there was literally 10 people in the entire place. But I just treated it like, you know, I was DJing for like Coachella and it all worked out. So never judge a book by its cover is the moral of this story, because you never know what's going to happen.
Our second storyteller is Mitch Haney.
So I'm Mitch Haney, and I'm a hydroponic farmer. I've been operating my business for about 8 years here in San Antonio, and I'm going to tell the story of the first month or so that I was running my farm. And so I had just graduated from undergrad in the fall of 2013, and I was ready to start what I thought was going to transform and fix agriculture. I was worried about environmental problems, and I wanted to work in a business that I thought could make agriculture sustainable. So I had gotten connected to an investor in San Antonio who is interested in hydroponics. Hydroponics is a technique where you grow plants outside of soil so you can use nutrient-rich water, and what it allows you to do is grow in places you normally couldn't. So in my farm, which is based in a shipping container, I can grow plants vertically, about 10 high per square foot, and so my yield can be higher. I can grow all year long. When I was starting, I was all on my own, and I was in this big warehouse that was owned by a friend of my investor, and I was convinced that this was my mission. All of my friends had graduated and left at that time, and so I was pretty singularly focused on trying to just get my farm going, get everything yielding and profitable, and hopefully good enough that I can build a bunch more farms and solve climate change, which I figured would take me a couple years. I was also a previous camper. I would go out backpacking and camping a lot, and so in my mind I thought, well, the way that I can stay extra committed and get done a little faster was by pitching a tent and sleeping in the farm, and so then when I was waking I'd be working, and when I was sleeping I would just be right there in case anything went wrong. So it's a 16,000 square foot warehouse, and I have a 40-foot shipping container at that time with plants in it, and then my tent and nothing else. So it's totally empty. I'm in this big open empty space in downtown San Antonio. And it's about the middle of October or so, and just down the street is a haunted house that San Antonio folks might know called the Psycho Asylum, which I didn't know about at the time, but I learned about pretty quickly because when I was sleeping in my tent, I would hear chainsaw noises and then screams. Which was, like a charming addition to the atmosphere of an already big empty warehouse and like a rickety, windy set of rolling doors while I was on my own. But I've never been willing to admit that I'm afraid of scary movies or anything, and so I was just kind of convinced, well, it's cool. It's a intentionally haunted house. It's all good. So I would sleep and ignore it and think, well, I'm really tough for not worrying about this. So late night, in the middle of October or so, I'm in my farm, and I'm trying to develop and build kind of the last things that are going to go into it. I already have some plants that are growing and need to be transplanted into my first crop in my vertical towers that are going to grow out towards lights. And I'm pretty excited because it seems like this technology is going to replace, in my mind, all of the farms in the past that are growing leafy greens. That this is just how this is what the future looks like, and we just need to make it work, and then this is going to be nutritious and sustainable produce. So I have to download a software update in order to adjust the timing on the pumps. Now, the software was sent by someone else. I'm not a coder. So I started downloading it on my laptop, which is the control panel that I was using for the farm in general. And it turns out that this is going to be like a 2-hour update or so. There's a lot of different pieces of software that are coming in. So I set it on. I started listening to some music on my phone. I think it was like Pandora, so I was hopping around to different stuff. I was dancing, kind of jamming and singing while I'm in the farm. And I start planting a new amount of seeds. I need to put another flat down, put it in my little seedling germination area. Okay, that takes me a little while. I'm listening to some good music, and I'm still about only 20% done on my progress update. I can see the bar kind of moving forward. Then when I get to about 50% or so, I'm like, all right, well, I've been transplanting now for a little while, which is taking the seedlings and putting them into the big towers to grow out towards the lights. And I was like, well, all right, I'll do another flat and transplant those as well. So I've pretty much done all my busy work. I go and kind of check on the pH, which is an important metric for the nutrients. And I'm like looking at the air conditioner. I changed the air conditioning filter. It's still, I'm at about 80% or so. And so then I just kind of settle in and start playing around on my phone, waiting for the last 20%. And it's creeping real gradually. And, I hear an occasional haunted house Halloween noise, but okay, everything's good. The farm is working great. And then we're at 95%. Everything is, very smooth. I'm kind of looking around thinking, wow, this was not so hard to get the farm up and running. This is going to be really terrific when I build like 100 more of these and supply the whole city with kale and lettuce. And then 99% becomes 100, and in that moment, all the lights, all the pumps, all the air conditioner, all the fans turn off. I'm in silence and darkness in the middle of this empty warehouse, and I hear this scream coming from the haunted house down the street. And I'm right in the middle of a shipping container inside this big empty shell, and I'm not really sure what to do. It's about 11 p.m., and so the first thing that you do when the lights turn off in a situation like this is you go for the light switch. Well, obviously that didn't work. Every piece of power was off. So I grab my phone and I kind of like walk over to the electrical area. I'm no electrician, but I know that the breakers trip and you have to deal with that. So I try flipping the breakers back and forth, nothing. Okay, all right. So then I go back to my laptop and I try to do just a reset. All right, I'll just restart my computer. That'll probably fix it. It's a Windows, so maybe that was the problem. And nope, still didn't work. And so by this time, my phone is running pretty low on battery, and so I plug in my charger. Well, that's not going to work. None of the power is on in the whole farm. So, okay, well, I'm running low on power, and there is no power in the building or in my farm in general. And I realized that I'm just going to have to maintain my hydroponic plants the same way that people have been farming for the last 5,000 years or so. So I set a little timer. Every 3 hours, I wake myself up because I go to my little air mattress in my tent and then come back out, and I fill up buckets and I pour them over the top of these towers to keep these plants going. And then I do that all night, interspersed with an occasional outcry of fear coming from down the street. And so the next day I woke up and I call the company that had sent me this software that was pretty buggy. Apparently I was one of the first people to try it or download it, I guess, around the country. And they sent me a patch after they worked on it for a little while. The whole time, every 3 hours, I'm filling up and putting water onto my plants the classic old school way. And eventually it's all kind of fixed up and my plants are running and everything survived. My kind of like elbow grease and old style preservation worked out. My plants grew up and worked out. My first delivery was about 2 weeks later that I delivered to Earth Juice Bar a bunch of kale. And I realized kind of from then on, yeah, the technology that I had in this hydroponics was really impressive. LED lights are cool. But if something breaks and you can't fix it in a farm, doesn't really matter how high tech it was, you need to get it running again. So pretty much everything in my hydroponics now has an analog backdrop where if something fails, there's a timer or there's a replacement. I have parts all over the place, my plumbing and my electrical parts, and I have very few computers in my system now, and so I can build them out on a ranch without a lot of technology. And it just reminded me kind of that these technologies can be hugely transformative and powerful, but they're going to rely on the farmer, and they're going to rely on the parts that the farmer can either build or replace or use themselves. And from then on, every time I build a garden or try to build a kitchen, or that warehouse is filled up with kitchens now that I built on my own, really not with a bunch of nice technology, but with classic old strategies. The future is going to need these strategies of the past. There's not just going to be like a huge transformation, but it'll integrate new kind of clever strategies as well. And so that was my first month farming, and it scared me a bit.
Our last storyteller is Dan Kachik.
All right, so I am Dan Kostick. I own King William District CrossFit with my wife, and we are located in Southtown, San Antonio. So I'll call this story a day in the life of an entrepreneur. I have found through my experience that if I can average 60% of my time actually doing my business of choice as far as an entrepreneur is, that's a good percentage, because there have been times I've been spending only 15 or 20% of my time actually running a gym, and the rest of the time was doing whatever else I needed to do to make the business work and be able to keep doing that. So to give a little background on the story I was going to tell today, we had a nice little spot in Southtown San Antonio, a gym we'd had for about 3 years, and it was about time for my lease renewal with my landlord, and he had said this was not going to be a problem, this was going to be great, I like the spot, and then he was kind of avoiding me, kind of kicking the can down in the road, being somewhat hard to get a hold of, and I felt like something was wrong, and turned out I was right. He actually sent his dad over to deliver the bad news, and his dad told me I had about 2 weeks to get all my stuff out, that they had an offer from a bank, which was I understood from a business perspective, a good offer. They were going to pay him like 3 times what I was paying in rent. And so I had 2 weeks to get my stuff out and figure something out. So that's what I did. I temporarily moved my stuff in with another gym, and we shared space with them for a while, and I started looking for a new place to lease. Wasn't for a variety of reasons. I was not able to find something that would work for our needs with a lease that was going to make us successful. And so what ended up happening is I ended up purchasing land from Union Pacific Railroad, and then I became a general contractor for the next 2 years, and we were going to build our gym from the ground up. And so as part of getting this project done, and I'd never been a general contractor, had no desire to be, and definitely don't now still, but you had to get the land platted. Platting is like a land's birth certificate, where you have to get the contours done, the parameter, the borders set, all within, so it's a certain level above the streets for runoff purposes and that kind of stuff. And an engineer, a civil engineer, has to do that. So I was engineering shopping, and my budget for this whole project, I had honestly no business doing what I was doing with the budget we had. It was ridiculous. So cheap was the right price for me with everything. And one of my members, her husband had built a couple houses here in town and referred me to this engineer. And since then, we've had some laughs about it, and he's apologized. We got through it, but he said Majid is somewhat hard to deal with, but he is cheap. And again, that fit within my price range. And so I went and met with Majid, and indeed he was very condescending and abrasive out of the gates, told me that I was definitely going to fail, but was willing to take my money to do the project. And so he started working on the plat. And as part of the plat, you have to get the land contoured, as I said, to a certain height. And you need somebody to do that. There are ground movers that do those kind of jobs. And as luck would have it again, I had another member whose husband did that for a living. He mainly did big projects, hotels, large business offices, that kind of stuff, but he was willing to do it for me for free, which was also the right price. And so I would take the plans and take them over to him. And when I started doing this, he started having questions about the plans. He's like, I don't understand these contour lines. So then I'd go back to Majid. Majid would tell me, whoever's looking at this is an idiot. This is how they're always done. I'd go back to him. He's like, your engineer's an idiot because I've never seen plans drawn like this. So I got ping-ponged back and forth a little bit. And then eventually was like, let's settle this like civilized adults and meet at the lot and we can talk out this misunderstanding. And so we set up a date, and I think this was like July or August of 2017. It was a sunny day, and the lot at this point is just a big, overgrown, grassy field. So I drove out there in my truck. Majid drove out there in his truck. Another guy had helping me with the construction showed up, and then this gentleman, Gail's husband, who was going to do the contours of the land, he showed up as well. So we all get out, and I make the introductions. And Majid's opening salvo, like how he starts with this is, why are you such a fucking idiot? And this guy, again, is doing this as a favor to me, but is somewhat taken aback, that this another guy's talking to him. He's like, hey, I just have some questions. I've never seen the lines drawn like this. And he's like, no, shut up. You've never seen plans like this. You're an idiot. And the conversation continues to go downhill from there. And this guy, I have inadvertently put him in a very awkward position. Like, he's there as a favor to me. He knows I don't have any money, and that's why he's willing to do it for free. And now this guy is cussing him out that he's never met before. And so Majid continues to be combative. He would try and talk details, explain to me these lines, and Majid's like, shut up, this kind of stuff. So it ends up at the point where Majid's poking him in the chest, literally going, shut the up, like this. And the other guy that's out there with me, I think is just like, as I am, just incredulous that this is happening, and he steps in between him and he pushes Majid back. He's like, would you just take it easy? This guy just has some questions. Just take it easy for a minute. So Majid walks back to his truck, opens up the passenger door, and pulls out a handgun. Now, he doesn't point it at us, but he makes a show of showing it to us and stuffs it into his pants. And as you can imagine, I'm like, are you kidding me right now, Majid? I didn't know it was ridiculous. And so I'm like, are you kidding me? We are adults out here talking about your engineering plans, and you're pulling a gun on us. And he's like, none of you touch me. And I'm like, are you serious right now? Are you kidding me? And the other guy who's there, Gail's husband, looks at me and says, I'm sorry, Dan, I'm not doing this. And I was like, you know what, I don't blame you. I'm sorry, my apologies. And he gets in his truck and drives off. And then I'm like, Majid, what are you doing? And he's like, I told you that guy was an idiot. I'm like, you. And so he then gets in his truck and drives off too. And that was about the work we got done for that day. So that was one of my days as general contractor. And the other guy, him and I both left. I had to pull over into a parking lot and calm myself down for a little while there after that. I'm happy to say that what happened is I was stuck with Majid for the plat. I've learned through this process that once you start with somebody, they pretty much have to do it or you're completely starting over, both from a price perspective and a timeline perspective. And the thing was, if it was just the plat, the only person that had to deal with Majid was me. I would get the plans, he would take it back to the city, and I would take it back to the city. And so I got another engineer from Arredondo Group to do the plans. And I think eventually Majid knew I was using somebody else, but by that time he was as sick of me as I was of him. So we got the plat done. That is finished. And I am happy to say that 3 years later, we have a building that we're running a successful gym in. This is going great. And I do spend a lot more of my time now running the gym. But that was one of the hurdles I had to get through to get that process done.
Thank you again for spending time with us. We hope you enjoyed real stories from real people here in San Antonio. If you have a story that you'd like to share with us, please visit tpr.org/WR. I'm your host, Andrea Vocab Sanderson, and I hope you have a wonderful holiday season.